Hello and welcome. I'm your host, No Hops, and this video is a special one. This last season has been the start of a turning point in the NBA, where the youngest stars are starting to shine more as legitimate players in the league. Combine this with the older generation of players still playing at a top level, and you have one of the best talent pools the league has seen in years. And there's no better way to celebrate this than with a list counting down the top 25 players in the league, along with an explanation of how each of them play to be as high on the list as they are. Also, let me know in the comments what your list for the top players is, because I'd like to compare my list with yours. The way how this list is judged is based on how players perform when they're at the healthiest point they can be. Since this year has been filled with injuries, I think it's for the best if we just completely ignore them. We'll look at the most recent version of each player when they were near or at 100%. For example, for someone like LeBron, his ranking is based on how he performed before his injury, along with how we can expect his injury to impact his performance in terms of athleticism and skill. Just gotta give an obvious disclaimer and say that this video is not fact. It is the opinion of a 17-year-old who just really loves the NBA. I think the rankings are fair, but I can almost guarantee that you will not agree with every single one of them. So let's keep that in mind and let's get started. Before we get into it though, I'd like to give a few honourable mentions. The players up on the screen right now are the ones that didn't make it. They're in no particular order, but I'll say some of them, like Chris Middleton and Zach LaVine, were verging on making the list, and I see a very valid argument for swapping them in for some of the lower rankings. Sorry if your favourite player didn't make the list. 25 spots is much less than it seems. Speaking of, at number 25 we have Karl Anthony Towns, someone who actually had a decrease in terms of point production and efficiency this year, but what has made him so good has stayed the same. Cat is the ultimate stretch big, shooting near 40% from deep, and obviously by being 7 foot he can score at the rim with ease. This makes him one of the best defensive bigs in the league, and one of the few things that Timberwolves fans can actually be happy about. I think that Towns will eventually have a Devin Booker type of ascension, where the young players start to fill their shoes a little bit better, and he can be the best or one of the best players on a solid playoff team. You really can't blame him for being on one of the worst franchises ever. I do think that he can still prove himself further though, and that's why he's not higher on the list. At number 24, we're contrasting offense with defense with Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year whether you like it or not. Rudy is the best defensive center in the league and a solid rebounder, with a 7'9" wingspan and an amazing basketball IQ when it comes to how he should act when a player is driving to the rim. He is one of the best rim protectors and defensive minds in the league. The obvious main drawback to him though is his offense. He really isn't anything special as a scorer, and therefore you have to surround him with quality shooters to make up for him. But at the end of the day, I think it's pretty fair to say that having Gobert on your team is a huge plus, and most teams in the league could use a player like him. He did get a little exposed in the recent Clippers-Jazz series, but we'll have to see if it remains a trend in order for it to be taken into account for his placement. At number 23, we've got a pretty surprising player in Julius Randle. I genuinely have no words for how insane this dude's improvement was this year. Not only completely changing the course of his career, but also completely changing the course of an entire franchise. I don't care what anyone says, Randle deserves to be on this list. His point productivity went up from 19 to 24 points per game, and he nearly doubled his assists per game total, which is by far the most slept on part of his game. A power forward or center that can pass is a great asset to have, as a certain Serbian center is currently proving. And this passing improvement was definitely one of the reasons as to why the Knicks were able to get the 4th seed this year, since he was able to get the team as a whole working more cohesively. Obviously, Randle played terribly in the playoffs, but that doesn't change what he did in the regular season, and I don't think it's fair to judge someone based on one playoff series. Luckily for the next player, we don't need to worry about playoff performances, because at number 22 we have Zion Williamson. Damn! Zion had his first full season this year and he did not disappoint, getting an average of 27 points per game and 7 rebounds. I feel like people don't give Zion credit because he's on the Pelicans, but you gotta look at the facts. Zion is one of the best paint players in the league already, leading the league in inside buckets at 20 years old. I think he still has a ways to go defensively, and it would be good for him if he developed a 3-point shot in this league, but since he's so young, he'll definitely be rising up the list each season, and I'm hoping for the Pelicans to have that breakout year soon. At number 21, we have Mr. Polarizing, Russell Westbrook. I know that wherever I'm going to put this guy, I'm never going to please everyone. Some people think he's the GOAT, and some people think that he shouldn't even be in the league. I'm putting him here. To those who don't follow NBA news, after the Wizards' terrible first half of the season, it was revealed that Russ was playing on a torn quad for a majority of said cold stretch, resulting in far below average efficiency and giving a majority of the NBA community the idea that this dude may be washed. Once recovered, however, he improved in every way, averaging a 23-point, 13 assist, 13 rebound triple-double on better efficiency, making a lot of people, including myself, reevaluate his worth as a player. My consensus now is that he's still a great player who I don't really think fits well in a lot of teams, but in his own words, if people could do what he did, then they would. So I'm going to give him some respect and put him at number 21. At number 22, we've got Jimmy Buckets Butler, a player who had a very down than up than down season this year. Butler was one of the players who got affected pretty badly by the health and safety protocol at the start of the season, which resulted in his team struggling pretty bad. At the point before Butler returned, the Heat had a .333 win rate. When he returned, he got them out of the hole along with getting some solid stats, and they ended the season with a positive winning percentage of .556. I know that he had a pretty disappointing postseason, but that doesn't mean you should overlook his regular season feat. We've seen what he's capable in the playoffs, and the Bucks this year were in top form that series. Everyone has bad series, you just have to look at it in a bigger scale than the last month. With these next four players, I'd say that they're all pretty close together, and the roles on their teams are all pretty similar, so I wouldn't be mad if you think that their order should be different. So starting off for teens with, what do you know, number 19, we've got the scoring machine, Bradley Beal. In my eyes, Beal had a pretty flawless season if you look at what his role was as a player. A guard who plays with Westbrook doesn't need to worry about distribution. The only thing that he had to do on offense was score, and score he did, averaging 31.3 points on alright efficiency and nearly even winning the scoring title. Something tells me I'm going to be saying the word score a lot in this section. When Russ was playing on a torn quad, Beal was the only player on that team playing at a top level. I remember him getting 40 plus points in back-to-back games that were both losses. Obviously he has the downside of being a slightly below average defender, but the benefits definitely outweigh the cons. Beal is better than Westbrook in the way that nearly every team would want Beal to play for them since they know what they're getting, but you can't really say the same about Russ. It annoys me that he's spending his prime on a losing team, but it doesn't change how impressive of a season he's had. At number 18, we have a player who had one of the biggest glow-up seasons this year, and really raises public perception across the NBA, aside from New York fans.
Fuck Trae Young! You motherfucker! I'm gonna fuck you up! Trae Young! Bow, 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 bow!
Trae Young. Trae was seen as being an overrated shot chucker by many people going into last season, after not only leading his team to a 5th seed, but also having a deep playoff run, beating the favoured Knicks and the heavily favoured 76ers. Those takes have been put to sleep. Trae is an expert at getting to the rim with his signature floater and is a solid 3-point shooter. What really puts him above Beal for me though is his playmaking ability. With the second most assists per game at 9.4, Young is a player that will not only score but get his team heavily involved as well. These playoffs he had some insane performances, namely Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals where he had 48 and 11, which is just straight up bonkers. It should be noted that the squad around Trae is very good. When their star was having a bad game or was injured these playoffs, they still performed very well. So it's not fair to say that Trae Young was doing a carry job, but he definitely deserves his respect after this season. At 17, we have someone who was also heavily doubted for a long time, but now he's dropping 40 in the finals. It's Devin Booker. I'm going to say this right now so you understand what frame of mind I'm coming from when talking about this, but I don't believe in empty stats unless the efficiency is piss poor. And for the first 4 years of Booker's career, empty stats were a term that people attached to his name, completely disregarding the fact that the team around him was nowhere near a playoff level. For those who don't know, the idea of empty stats is that someone can score or put up ridiculous numbers, but if they're on a losing team, it means that those performances don't mean anything for the greatness of said player since they aren't winning. And although it would be nice to be able to win by yourself, basketball is a team game, If you don't have the right players around you, then you simply won't win. Now coming back to Booker, who would have thought that a player who scored 70 points in a game as a rookie was actually going to end up playing well on the top level of basketball when they have a good team around them? It's crazy. That was a bit of a rant, but let's talk about what actually makes Devin Booker so good. He's a masterful mid-range shooter and is one of those players that will be able to go full ISO and get you a bucket no problem. He's also an underrated passer. He's able to read the floor real well and make the right passes, which works really well for the Suns' pass-first style of offense. His defense is below average. I bet you're starting to see a bit of a trend here now. But I don't think it's at the point of him being a liability on defense like Trey, where you can just target him because of his size for some easy buckets. That's my reasoning for him being at the number 17 spot. Now, closing off the quartet of scorers, at number 16 we have Donovan Mitchell. Let's just get to the main pro for Mitchell right out of the gate. He was the best player on the best regular season team this year, no question. During the regular season, D-Mitch isn't anything above all-star level. 26 points and 5 assists on high three-point efficiency, which don't get me wrong is still very impressive and would have him on this list no matter what. But what makes Mitchell so special is his playoff performances. In the Jazz's last 2 playoff runs, D-Mitch has averaged 34.4 points per game, which is insane. This man becomes a superstar in the playoffs, and you can say they choked against the Clippers, which is true. The Jazz as a whole choked, especially Gobert. And Mitchell didn't do that great in the series-ending game either, getting only 39 points and 9 assists. Definitely lowered his value as a player on that one. And yeah, you can argue that Booker has been playing great in the playoffs as well, which is true and why they're so close together on this list. In fact, they were so close that I had to settle for pure statistical differences to make up my mind, which is what you're seeing right now. If you're putting Booker over Donovan Mitchell, then be my guest, but for me, I've got him at 16. I'm going to do a quick honourable mention right here and put pre-injury Klay Thompson at number 15.5. Because we have no idea what he's going to be like when he comes back from his Achilles tear, I'm not going to give him an exact position. Instead, I'm going to put where I think 2019 Klay Thompson should go, and that's right here. I'll be quick with why. Basically, Klay is the best 3-and-D player of all time. He doesn't have the capacity to be the best player on a championship team, but he is by far one of the best players to put next to your superstar. He shot 42% from 3 and was usually the one who defended the opposing team's best player on the perimeter, and did a damn good job at it. Anyways, his spot on this list is likely going to change, but that's where I have him for now. At 15, we have the 6-foot point guard who continues to impress, Chris Paul. I love CP3 because he's the definition of a team player. Besides Rudy Gobert, he probably has the least impressive stats on this list, but it's everything else that he brings to the table that makes me put him here. Chris Paul is the best foundational player for a team to have besides LeBron. He may not consistently give you 30, but the sheer impact he has on any team you put him on shows the intangibles that he brings. We haven't seen him outdo expectations just once, but twice, in the past 2 years, on 2 completely different teams. And although he may have played somewhat average in the finals as a whole, we can't forget everything that he did to get the Suns to that point. People forget, but the Suns were expected to be a fringe playoff team with the addition of CP3. This dude brings leadership, great team play, and obviously a player that can score from mid-range at ease. Surprise you with his defensive capabilities as a small man, and throw dimes out like his teammates are homeless. The sheer impact that Chris Paul had on the Suns this year lets him earn the number 15 spot. At number 14, we're unfortunately one off his number because it's Paul George. Wait, what's that I hear? Is that the sound of haters who disregarded this entire season because of what he did last year? Well, you can do me a favor and go cry elsewhere because I ain't having any of it. Paul George's season this year was a huge success in my books, besides the game where my Mavericks beat him by 50, but allow it. Here's a few stats for you people, and you can tell me if he's still a bum or not after hearing them. PG-13 averaged 41% from 3 this season on almost 8 attempts per game, got 23 points per game as a second option, and got 27 points per game when Kawhi wasn't playing. And to top it all off, he defied expectations in the playoffs by leading his team past the Jazz in games 5 and 6, and even pushed the Suns to 6 without Kawhi as well, averaging 27 and 10 rebounds in this year's playoffs. I'm going to admit that I was laughing too when the Clippers choked last year, but it's a different story this year. Paul George did nothing but impress me in the 21 season. What you're getting in him is a great 3-point shooter and in general someone who can score well on all 3 levels, a solid perimeter defender as well as someone who has height and can get you rebounds. I think Paul George deserves to be this high, so he's getting number 14. At number 13 we have the Celtics star who taught me how to tie a tie, Jason Tatum. Now, Tatum as an individual in terms of production improved massively this year, but his team got way worse. If you want to hear more about that, then I've got a video about this which I've got in the description. Disappointing season or not, Tatum is an absolute beast. He currently averages 26.5 points per game and does this shooting 39% from 3 on 7.6 attempts. Tatum is a difficult player to describe for me. The best way I could describe the way how he plays is smooth. He's not KD, but he's got that silky jumper and is just one of those players that looks so natural with the ball in their hands. JT is also a very solid playoff performer. In this year's playoffs, he only played 5 games, but actually managed to score 50 and get a win over the Nets, which to me is impressive given the team situation. What makes Jason Tatum better than all of the people before him is that he has very high volume scoring coupled with outstanding efficiency. Nobody else placing before him on this list has both of those fields equal or better than JT. He also gets such high point production while having to share a court with Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown, who both aren't ridiculous playmakers and specialize in scoring. I think 13 for Tatum is fair. At number 12, we have the third best player on the Nets, Kyrie Irving. Yes, that is how completely broken their team is. Something that I feel has been overlooked by many fans when it comes to Kyrie is that he had a 50-40-90 season this year. For those who don't know, that means 50% shooting from the field, 40% from 3, and 90% from the line. He not only did something that only 8 other players in NBA history have done, but he also did it getting 27 points per game. And to top it all off, he has a similar situation to Tatum in the way that he was sharing the court with KD and Harden at times, and yet still managed to have such high production, which shows how incredible his efficiency was to be able to score 27 a game with less opportunities to shoot. As for an explanation on what Kyrie's skill set is, well, I shouldn't have to tell you. We're talking about the Sham God. This dude will cross you up even when you're standing 20 meters away from him. In fact, sometimes when I trip over, I think it's just Kyrie breaking my ankles from the other side of the planet. Damn it, Kyrie! Kyrie then uses these handles to either get to the rim or make space and get a shot over you with that 50-40-90 shooting accuracy. This dude is an offensive weapon and there's no denying it. I feel like people aren't giving Kyrie his respect because soon after he left Boston he got injured, and now he's come back from the injury on a super team. But people gotta remember how good this dude is. His main drawback is his defense. He'll still get you a steal or maybe 2 each game, but obviously at his size he's easy to take advantage of if you get the mismatch. But it's hardly a drawback since that's the case for basically any point guard. Kyrie gets number 12 on this list because, like his opinion on the shape of the earth, he flat out deserves it. That's so bad. And now we're getting into the big guns, not just because these next players are superstars, but also because this next player at number 11 is big and an absolute gun, being Anthony Davis. AD is a tricky player to rank for me. Since he's only 28, I think that when he comes back after this off-season, it's fair to say that he'll be just as good as he was before his injury. Perhaps more injury-prone, but we aren't focusing on that. Even when AD is playing at his best, I still find it hard to put him in the top 10. He's one of the best number 2 options you can have on your team. A big man who can score on all 3 levels, he has above average speed for a big man which he'll use to get past other bigs, and if he's guarded by someone smaller, he can abuse his size and use his post-up skills for an easy bucket. He is also Defensive Player of the Year material for his rim protection and shot blocking ability. He is possibly the most well-rounded big man in the league, and I don't mean him any disrespect with this placement. So, you may be asking, why is he only 11th place? Well, all of the players ahead of AD are players that I think have that best player on a championship team DNA, or they're just more outstanding players than him. It's a situation where he hasn't done anything wrong to be this low, it's just that the other players are better than him. He's still a superstar and an absolute beast though, don't get it twisted. Starting the top 10 with, funnily enough, number 10, we've got Damian Lillard. This is a guy who, like every other season he's been in, put the Blazers on his back this season and took him to the playoffs. It is without question that Dame is the second best three-point shooter in the league. He has seemingly unlimited range and shoots at 39% from deep. He gets his 39% while being the first option on a team without an all-star, and literally everyone on the opposing team knows he's going to shoot a 3, so he gets defended like crazy every time. So although his shooting percentages aren't as high as someone like Kyrie's, I can guarantee you that his shots are harder to hit on average since Kyrie has some of the best floor spacing you can get on the Nets. Dame is also an underrated passer, getting 7 to 8 assists per game, and you can definitely tell with the eye test that this guy is one of, if not the most clutch players in the league. There are countless examples of Dame hitting a game-winning shot or just straight up willing his team to the win when he gets hot. And when Dame gets hot, you literally cannot do anything to stop him. A recent example of this is Game 5 of the Blazers-Nuggets series, where Dame recorded the highest game score in NBA playoff history. And they still lost because his team didn't pull through. That's the thing with Lillard. People don't give him enough respect because he has never been on a good enough team to be in the spotlight. If he ends up leaving Portland to join a contender, I can 100% guarantee you that he will get way more respect than he currently does. At number 9 we have my favourite player, which I hope is proof that I'm looking at this without bias. It's Luka Doncic. At the age of 22, what this dude is doing is LeBron-esque, and I have no doubt in my mind that this dude will become the best player in the league very soon. But focusing on the right now part, how good is Luka Doncic? Well, I would say that his season was on a similar level to Dame. Both got their teams to the same regular season record with similarly talented squads around them. What makes Luka better than Dame in my opinion is a combination of him having a deeper offensive bag along with his insane playoff feats, which I personally think outshine Dame's, as ludicrous as it may sound. The sample size for Luka's playoff performances is still very small, so take this with a grain of salt, but Luka Doncic in his 13 career playoff games is averaging the same amount of points per game as Michael Jordan. He's also averaging 10 assists, and he almost carried his team past a healthy Clippers squad. I hate to bring up hypotheticals, but if the Clippers didn't lose Kawhi, then they would have definitely made it to the finals, and honestly would have had a good chance of getting the chip. So I want you to notice how insane it really is that Luka managed to take this team to 7 games with no real second option at that point. Here's a rundown on Luka's game. He is able to make his own shot from anywhere, close, mid, or 3. And although he isn't athletically anything special, he is able to change his pace in a way that leaves the defender hopeless in trying to catch up with him. He has incredible court vision on the level of LeBron, and will get his whole team involved. If you're one of those people saying that he's a ball hog, then I'll ask you, have you actually seen this dude play? This dude will do whatever it takes to get that win. He is a big player for his position on defense, so he can use that to his advantage even though he isn't an amazing defender. 3 years in, and he's already a superstar. Luka takes spot number 9. Alrighty, now at number 8 we've got Philly's Joel Embiid, the MVP favourite before getting injured. Embiid is a very traditional center who can shoot the 3 if you need him to. He'll get you high percentage buckets from the inside and is excellent at drawing fouls not only because of his Oscar level acting skills, but also because of how strong he is, which forces players to foul instead of being straight up overwhelmed by said strength. On the other side of the court, he is a great defender. I would say he's very similar defensively to AD, but since he's much larger, he can take on bigger opponents that AD can't. He averaged 28 points in the regular season in the playoffs, and speaking of the playoffs, he was one of the only ones on his team remaining consistent throughout while suffering from an injured knee. It really isn't fair to blame Embiid for the 76ers' failure against the Hawks. Sure, he could have been better, but there were definitely points where you could see that his injury was affecting his game. When Embiid is at 100% though, you get an MVP candidate, top tier defender, scorer and rebounder, who I think can be your first option on a championship team. They should probably trade Ben Simmons first though. At number 7 we've got James Harden. Now, when Harden got traded, people were pretty skeptical about whether he would fit into the Brooklyn offense. He shut all of those people up immediately. Harden sacrificed his points per game to become the point guard of the Nets. He focused on distribution and as a result defied what we believed he would do by turning the so-called ISO gang into a compatible working team. When James Harden was on the court for the Nets, they were 29-7. Without him, they were 20-16, which shows how integral he was to the squad. Along with getting his team involved, Harden is one of the best isolation scorers in the game. He'll put enough space between him and the defender to get off a step-back three, and he's exceptional when it comes to getting to the rim. He loves to do this thing where he'll dribble the ball right in front of you at the three-point line, and then the moment you bite and reach in, he'll blow by you and get an easy layup. Harden doesn't shoot mid-range and also a relatively weak defender, but he is so good at the parts of his games that he specializes in that I think it makes up for it. He didn't have a great postseason, having numbers below average, but his injury definitely played a huge role in this happening. He was basically just used as a decoy, since if he went all out, he'd just make his injury even worse. But when he's at 100%, he gets number 7. We're getting near the top, and you can tell this by the fact that in number 6, we have our reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic. Jokic is a straight-up basketball anomaly, an unathletic 7-foot point guard in disguise as a center. He is one of the best passers in the league and couples it with unguardable post moves and a 39% three-point shot. He will give you a filled-out stat sheet of 26 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists per game, basically doing everything on the offensive end. The MVP award is based largely on health, and in this injury-ridden season, Jokic played all 72 games, which was one of the main reasons for him getting it. As a result, he may be the MVP, but he isn't number 1. Despite this though, it's not fair to say that Jokic didn't earn the award, because he most certainly did. He lost his second best player midway through the season in Jamal Murray, and when people expected the Nuggets to decline, they didn't, getting a 16-8 record with Jokic at the helm, which is basically the same winning percentage as they had with Murray on the squad. They managed to get past a Blazers squad with Dame going absolutely ballistic to then get swept by a Suns team on a mission. But Jokic remained consistently good throughout, so you can't fault him there. Jokic gets spot number 6. We aren't dealing with the big guns anymore, we're dealing with the cannons, cause we're entering the top 5. At number 5, we've got Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi, when healthy, is a perfect combination of offense and defense. He will give you poster dunks, Jordan-esque mid-range jumpers, and clutch three-point shots when he needs it. That's fine and all, but what really sets him apart is what he'll do defensively for you. He may not be Defensive Player of the Year material anymore, but he'll slow down your best player every time and get you those necessary steals consistently. The biggest issue that comes with him is game time though. I know that I said I'm ignoring injuries, but this is something that won't ever change. Kawhi, since the injury he got from Zaza the Wank Chula, has never been able to give long minutes, and if you try to put him in for over 40 minutes, you will not get the quality of play that you want. Hence the term load management, which is a full package deal that comes with Kawhi, and unfortunately cannot be ignored. What puts him above everyone else is his balance of offense and defense, what makes him one of the best two-way players in the league. Not the best, however. We'll get to him soon. For this next one, I'm going to keep the camera on the whole time because it's a pretty controversial one and I want to look you, the viewer, in the eye and tell you my honest thoughts. LeBron James is number 4, and I'm going to tell you my exact reasoning for that placement. LeBron came back from the playoffs and he was definitely not himself. I think injuries played a part in it, but he wasn't necessarily playing bad, getting a minimum of 25-5 each game from his return onwards. But he was not the player that we saw before the injury, and he most certainly was not the finals MVP that we saw in 2020. And yes, once again, I'm assuming 100% health, but I also need to take into account how their injury is going to affect their return. So is it so unfair to say that at the age of 36 going on to 37 and coming off a season-ending injury that LeBron won't be the best player in the world anymore? We need to look at the situation for what it is, because if we're looking at the 2020 version of LeBron, then yes, I do think he is the best player in the world. But we're not talking about that guy anymore. So what can we expect to see from LeBron when he returns from his injury? Well, at minimum, you've got the best passer in the league, a generally solid shooter, and every now and then he'll bring out his God-given athleticism like All Might from My Hero Academia. The era of great defense from LeBron is over. This man will choose his battles and going hard on defense will not be one of them. He will still be an invaluable asset for the rest of his career on the Lakers or any other team that he ends up on. But the time of LeBron being at the summit is gone, because there are 3 players that I think are better than him now. Alright, after that heart-to-heart conversation, I think it's time to get into someone who will make anyone smile. At number 3, we have the reigning Finals MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I just want to give a quick shout out to Giannis for getting that chip. I was obviously supporting the Mavericks in the playoffs, but I was choosing a team to support in the East, and I chose the Milwaukee Bucks. So it made me super happy to see Giannis get that ring. Alright, anyways, let's get back to the point. Giannis is the best two-way player in the world right now. No debate. He won Defensive Player of the Year last season and hasn't slowed down in that department at all, being a great shot blocker and even being able to guard on the perimeter at a high level as well. Paired with that is someone who can score 28 points per game, basically only because of how dominant he is in the paint. When Giannis is running to the basket with momentum, he cannot be stopped. He will either physical his way through or Euro step around you with those long ass legs. People say that Giannis doesn't have a bag and therefore cannot be the best player in the league. And besides the fact that he is developing new moves quite often, he doesn't need a bag to be the best. Did Shaq have a bag? In this era, is it really necessary to excel in every aspect instead of just being an absolute beast in one area of offense? Well, the answer is no, and Giannis is proving it. The one flaw that Giannis has that will make him the best player in the league if he fixed is his free throw shooting. No, just because he shot 17 from 19 from the line in the biggest game of his career does not mean he is now a great free throw shooter. What that performance showed us, however, is how much better on average Giannis can be if he became this good at free throws all the time. If he becomes a consistent 75 to 80% free throw shooter, then I have no doubt in my mind that he will be the best player in the league. He has an argument for being the best player in the league as is, but because he has such a blatant flaw in his game, I still struggle to put him above the next 2 players on this list. Speaking of, we are now approaching the pinnacle of basketball. These next 2 players I think are so close together, and each one has a solid argument for being the best player in the league. I do think one is better than the other though, so let's get into it with number 2 being Wardell Stephen Curry Jr. This is a hot take of mine, but if you take the 2016 unanimous MVP version of Curry and put him in the situation that current Curry was in this season, there will be little to no difference in how they each perform. Basically what I'm trying to say is that 2021 Curry is just as good as 2016 Curry. Let me tell you why. Curry has to deal with the fact that he is vastly superior offensively to everyone else on his team, which results in him getting defended the shit out of, to put it simply. Curry dropped an average of 32 points per game on 42% from 3. His percentage wasn't the best in the league, he ranked 19th. But to get 42% when you're getting double teamed on half of all possessions is straight ludicrous. On top of his insane ability to make high percentage shots from 3, his gravity is another factor that makes him a threat. As I said before, Curry makes defenses focus heavily on him throughout the game, whether he has the ball or not. Focus that is being put on Curry is focus that is not going on his teammates. As a result, it is much easier to catch the defense by surprise with backdoor cuts, some quality ball movement, or some other crazy stuff that I don't know about. I know I just did a terrible job of explaining how basketball gravity works, but I hope you get a general idea of it. Steph taking the Warriors to the 8th seed is a crazy achievement when you realize how terrible they were the season before, along with making no major changes besides having Curry return. It was so impressive that he came 3rd in MVP voting, despite how much team placement matters for the award. I could talk about what makes Curry so good for ages, so I'm not going to get too far into detail and move on from here. One last thing though, to the people that think that Giannis should be over Curry, all I have to say is would you put 2016 Curry over current Giannis? Because I would. And I also think that 2021 Curry is basically the same guy. Maybe with some slightly worse defense. Feel free to disagree though. Now, at long last, we reach the summit. If you use the process of elimination up to this point, then it's pretty obvious that I think that the best player in the world is Kevin Durant. KD is the best scorer in the league, no doubt in my mind. He scored 27 points per game on these insane splits, but statistics alone will not show you how good this man is at basketball. I hope you're seeing on screen the sheer madness that this dude is capable of. He came back from his injury playing at the same level that he left off, being able to turn any defender into his bitch without remorse. I'll give a very simple breakdown of how he does this. KD is 6'10 and has a 7'5" wingspan. Combine this with high agility and some of the best efficiency in the game, and you have someone who cannot be blocked due to how high the release is combined with how quickly he gets a shot off. And this silky unblocked shot has a very high chance of going in. In simple terms, the dude is unguardable and hits a majority of his shots, contested or not. In terms of defense, he isn't at the top, but he's definitely a defensive asset, being able to guard 1 through 5 due to his speed and length. He has underrated court vision and doesn't get masses of assists due to him rightfully being a shoot-first player in most situations. You probably already know about KD and how he plays, so I'll tell you why he's placed at the top. As I said before, KD is very close to Curry with Giannis only barely behind. The reason why I put him above both of them is that there is literally not a single weakness to his game. Where Giannis struggles to shoot, KD can. Who makes Curry struggle on defense is someone KD can handle. KD is an all-round player who I have a very hard time finding flaws in. Besides the shit that he says on Twitter, but that's not relevant. I can't get the thought out of my head that 1 inch was the deciding factor between the Bucks. I'm not even trying, I swear. The Bucks net series, and I refuse to let 1 inch be the difference between whether KD is the best player in the world or not, because trust me, things would have been a lot different if that had been a 3. He played incredible this offseason, and people have got to give him credit for it whether they like him or not. KD takes number 1 for now, but I expect Giannis to take it very soon. Alrighty, that was a full list. If you stayed through to this point, then I appreciate it so much. Like, this video took so fucking long. I think the script was like 10 pages, you'll be seeing it up on screen now. And I think that's honestly longer than anything I've ever written in my life. So if you could leave like a like or subscribe, then it will make all of this work worth it. Also, if you want to interact with me online, then my Instagram will be in the description. I post somewhat regularly on it. But yeah, anyways, this has been No Hops, and I'll see you in the next one.